The national grid collapsed on Monday after major power plants lost generation. Checks by our correspondent confirmed that the grid went down around 3 p.m., plunging many Nigerians into darkness. Power generation had peaked at about 4,800 megawatts earlier on Monday, before crashing to 139 megawatts as of 3 p.m., according to data obtained by our correspondent. The cause of the collapse could not be immediately confirmed. However, it occurred at a time when the Nigerian Independent System Operator was making efforts to ramp up generation following recent gas constraints caused by pipeline vandalism. As of the time of filing this report, all 22 power plants connected to the grid had lost generation. Powerless by design, a deepening examination of Nigeria's enduring power generation failure. Nigeria's chronic electricity crisis is one of the most enduring symbols of state failure in the post-colonial world. It is not merely a technical problem or an unfortunate policy misstep. It is a cumulative outcome of decades of weak leadership, institutional sabotage, corruption, and a deliberate abandonment of long-term national planning. In a country blessed with extraordinary energy resources and human capital, darkness has become normalized. This normalization is perhaps the most tragic consequence of all. Electricity is the backbone of modern society. It powers industry, education, healthcare, security, innovation, and governance itself. Where electricity is stable, economies grow and institutions strengthen. Where it fails, poverty deepens and inequality expands. Nigeria's inability to deliver reliable power to its citizens has crippled every sector of the economy and undermined public confidence in the state's capacity to govern. From promise to paralysis, a historical pattern of failure. At independence, Nigeria's power infrastructure, though limited, was functional and expanding. The Electricity Corporation of Nigeria, ECN, and later the National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, were envisioned as vehicles for national development. However, as oil revenues surged in the 1970s, discipline and planning collapsed. Instead of investing windfall profits into sustainable infrastructure, successive governments treated power projects as political rewards rather than strategic necessities. Military regimes further centralized control, weakening accountability and professionalism. Projects were announced with fanfare, but rarely completed. Maintenance culture disappeared. By the time democracy returned in 1999, the power sector was already decaying, obsolete equipment, overworked staff, and a transmission network unable to support expansion. The renaming of NEPA to the Power Holding Company in Nigeria, PHCN, did little more than rebrand dysfunction. Nigerians joked that NEPA meant never expect power always, a dark humor that reflected a deeper national resignation to failure. Generation without transmission, transmission without distribution. One of the most glaring structural flaws in Nigeria's power sector is the lack of coordinated planning. Governments have repeatedly invested in generation capacity without corresponding investments in transmission and distribution. Power plants are built but cannot evacuate electricity. Transmission lines are overloaded and vulnerable to collapse. Distribution companies lack meters, infrastructure, and incentives to improve service. This fragmentation reflects a deeper governance failure, the absence of systems thinking. Electricity is a chain. Generation, transmission, and distribution must work together. In Nigeria, each link is treated as an isolated political project rather than part of a coherent national system. As of today, Nigeria's installed capacity far exceeds what is actually delivered to consumers. Power plants sit idle due to gas shortages, unpaid debts, vandalized pipelines, or weak grid infrastructure. The national grid itself collapses multiple times a year, plunging the entire country into darkness in an instant, an occurrence so frequent it barely makes headlines anymore. The illusion of privatization. The 2013 privatization of the power sector was presented as a bold reform that would end decades of inefficiency. In reality, it exposed the dangers of market reforms without strong institutions. Assets were sold to politically connected investors, many of whom lacked the technical expertise or financial capacity to modernize infrastructure. Rather than improving service, privatization transferred public failure into private hands without solving the underlying problems. Tariff structures remain politically sensitive and economically unsustainable. Distribution companies struggle with revenue collection, electricity theft, and aging infrastructure. Consumers, meanwhile, pay more for less power, fueling public resentment. Regulatory agencies such as the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission (NERC) exist, but their authority is frequently undermined by political pressure. Without credible enforcement, privatization became less about efficiency and more about asset stripping. Corruption as a business model. Perhaps no sector better illustrates the corrosive impact of corruption on national development than Nigeria's power industry. Over the past 4 decades, tens of billions of dollars have been allocated to electricity projects. Yet the outcomes remain embarrassingly poor. Power contracts are routinely inflated. Projects are abandoned halfway. Payments are made for work never completed. Investigations are launched but rarely concluded. When corruption is not punished, it becomes institutionalized. Even more troubling is the political economy of failure. A vast informal industry now profits from Nigeria's power dysfunction. Diesel importers, generator manufacturers, fuel marketers, and maintenance contractors. For these actors, constant darkness is not a crisis. It is a revenue stream. As long as generators hum, incentives to fix the national grid remain weak. The economic strangulation of a nation, Nigeria's unreliable electricity supply, has imposed enormous economic costs. Manufacturers spend up to 40% of production costs on self-generated power. Many factories operate far below capacity or shut down entirely. Foreign investors cite power instability as a major deterrent. Job creation suffers and unemployment rises. Small and medium enterprises, the backbone of any healthy economy, are hit hardest. Tailors, welders, barbers, cyber cafes, cold storage operators, and tech startups all depend on electricity. For many, the choice is stark: buy fuel or close shop. This reality locks millions into subsistence survival rather than scalable growth. The macroeconomic consequences are severe: reduced industrial output, weak export capacity, currency pressure, and a shrinking tax base. Nigeria cannot industrialize in the dark. Social decay and human development loss. The electricity crisis is also a human development tragedy. Hospitals struggle to power life-saving equipment. Vaccines spoil due to unreliable refrigeration. Students in rural and urban areas alike study under torchlights and candles, widening educational inequality. The burden falls disproportionately on women and children, who are more exposed to indoor air pollution from generators and kerosene lamps. Health risks rise quietly, invisibly, and preventably. Over time, constant power failure reshapes behavior and expectations. Citizens plan their lives around outages. Public outrage fades into resignation. When dysfunction becomes normal, accountability disappears. Missed opportunities in renewables and decentralization. In an era of global energy transition, Nigeria has failed to fully embrace decentralized and renewable solutions. Solar energy, in particular, offers enormous potential given Nigeria's climate. Mini-grids and off-grid systems could rapidly electrify rural communities and reduce pressure on the national grid. Yet regulatory uncertainty, bureaucratic delays, and policy inconsistency discourage investment. Instead of empowering states, local governments, universities, and communities to generate power independently, Nigeria clings to an over-centralized model that has repeatedly failed. Recent constitutional amendments allowing states to generate power offer hope, but implementation remains slow. Without urgency, these reforms risk becoming yet another missed opportunity. Leadership, accountability, and the path forward. Nigeria's electricity crisis is ultimately a leadership crisis. It reflects a failure to prioritize national interest over political convenience. Countries with fewer resources have achieved stable power through discipline, planning, and accountability. Nigeria's failure is not inevitable. It is chosen through inaction and compromise. True reform would require transparent auditing of past and ongoing power projects, enforcement of contracts and regulatory standards, decentralization of generation and distribution, investment in transmission infrastructure, protection of consumers through fair but realistic tariffs, zero tolerance for corruption. Most importantly, it would require leaders willing to tell the truth. that there are no shortcuts, no miracles, and no slogans that can replace competent governance. Conclusion: darkness as a national verdict. Every blackout in Nigeria is a verdict on governance. Every generator-powered home is a quiet indictment of a system that has failed its people. Electricity is not a luxury. It is a basic promise of modern citizenship. Until Nigeria confronts the structural, political, and moral roots of its power crisis, development will remain an illusion. The tragedy is not that Nigeria lacks power, but that it has accepted powerlessness for far too long.